He's here to kill gods and chew gum, and he's all out of gum. We're talking about Gorr the God Butcher. Hi, I'm Nando, and in this series, I take a character from Marvel Comics, I talk about their backstory, their power set, their personality, and I give you some reading recommendations. And this week we have one of the best characters created in the last 25 years, a lot of people's favorite Thor villain, Gorr the God Butcher. And I will say right off the bat, for reading recommendations, books 1 through 11, the series Thor God of Thunder, Volume 1, written by Jason Aaron with art by Esad Ribic, Eve Savorkina, and Joseph Eno, is the best Gorr story. There are other stories Gorr has been in. There's the King Thor series. Gorr showed up very recently in the Phoenix comic. But all my recommendations are going to come from the original Thor God of Thunder series. However, if you want to read more Gorr, there's more to be read outside of Thor God of Thunder. Gorr has an incredibly tragic backstory. It takes place 3,000 years in the past. Basically, he's part of an alien race that is plagued by famine and disease and all kinds of stuff. They just can't catch a break. His whole family dies except for his son, who also became sick and died. And up until that point, Gorr, like everyone else he had encountered, believed the gods would help, believed the gods would intervene and save everybody. Praying to the gods enough would be able to solve your problems, and they just didn't. The gods did not come to rescue Gorr, and his son's death totally broke Gorr's faith in the gods. He was exiled by his society for this, and he just went wandering through the desert, and then one day, Gorr happened upon two gods that were fighting, or had fought, and then just kind of landed. One of them is apparently Null, which the timeline for this doesn't make any sense, but sure. The other one is just some golden god. Null's weapon, as we talk about in the Symbiote Spider-Man video, is all black the Necrosword, and it is a symbiote-like sword that creates darkness, because that's Null's whole thing, and uses darkness as a weapon. The golden god asks Gorr for help, and Gorr, who is now really sick of gods, takes the Necrosword, kills that god, and then from that point on, it's like all gods must die. He's the God Butcher, and he has this wonderful weapon. Now, the Necrosword, you're seeing it on screen, but I don't think either of the live-action versions of the Necrosword have done it justice. Sometimes, especially, I think this is mentioned in the What If Season 1, Episode 2 conversation. The Collector calls Hela's weapon the Necrosword, so she has the ability to just generate infinite swords. That's kind of what the Necrosword does. And then Gorr has a big sword that he uses to open up like a darkness dimension and create darkness monsters. I would say both of those undersell what all black the Necrosword lets Gorr do. It's basically a Green Lantern ring. It can let him create these constructs that sometimes are swords, but sometimes are other things. Sometimes become like people, and that's based off of his like imagining of them. But it is able to put Gorr fully on the same level as characters like Thor. So Gorr goes and he's like, I'm gonna kill all the gods, and just kills a bunch of them. Some of them are like violent, mean gods, but some of them are cool and helpful and like nice, and the kind of gods that Gorr was praying to back in the day. Eventually, Gorr stumbles upon Thor in the 9th century, so this is something that's important about this comic. It takes place over 3 kind of timelines, although they all do happen. Basically, in the 9th century, Thor is like living it up and hanging out with people, having sex with many different women, being worshipped by the people he loves it. And he finds a god from America, washes up on the shore in Iceland. And this leads to the first confrontation between Gorr and young Thor. And young Thor seemed to beat Gorr, but then obviously didn't. So then Gorr goes, kills more gods, builds an army. Regular Thor notices Gorr's doing stuff, and he's like, okay, well, I gotta deal with him. And they go to Chronux, which is the palace of the time gods, and Gorr uses the Pool of Forevers and the blood of the time gods to travel through time. He goes to the beginning of the universe, kills one of the elder gods, and then jumps far into the future. He starts enslaving gods there. He enslaves all of the gods in the future except for Thor, who's still alive. He is the Allfather at this point, and Gorr forced the enslaved gods to build something called the God Bomb, which is a weapon that would destroy all the gods throughout all of time. And this is where, and I know it's, he's like a homicidal maniac, but this is where Gorr starts to lose it, because this is where he's building constructs of his wife and his son, and they're talking to him, and it's like, that's not good. So young Thor ended up enslaved working on making this god bomb. Old Thor and medium Thor traveled to Gorr. They all had a big fight between the three of them. It's got this wonderful splash page. I love it. And even then, they couldn't beat Gorr. But now, having gotten all this power, defeating all the Thors, Gorr's kind of a god, and the construct of his wife tells him this, and Gorr destroys her. So then his kid, Agar, gets very upset about this, and prays for the god's victory. And this is the end of the arc. Thor is able to absorb the Necrosword and the God Bomb, and he has 2 Mjolnirs. It's awesome. Beats Gorr, and Gorr becomes the god of hypocrisy. And like I said, Gorr has only shown up really 2 other times, as far as, 2024. You've got King Thor. This was like an epilogue story, sort of, to this big Jason Aaron Thor run, where Gorr comes back, and I'm not going to spoil how this one goes. I'll just say Loki gets involved, and the end of it gets very existential and weird, but cool. And then the other story is still going on, although it seems like maybe the Gorr bit's over, and this is the Phoenix series that's going on. Gorr is now part of the Necrosword, even though he doesn't have it anymore. It is in his, heart, so he goes after the Phoenix, who is now pretty much a god. So I will say, for reading recommendations, I'm going to pick only books from the original run. And if you're going to read them, here's what you do. Just go to Thor, God of Thunder, Volume 1, Issue 1, and just read it. Read the next 11 issues. So I'll say number 1, number 2 are reading recommendations. I will say, if you just want to get a very simple overview of what Gorr's deal is, Thor, God of Thunder, Volume 1, Issue 6 is like the Gorr origin issue. What gods have wrought. It's written by Jason Aaron with art by Butch Geiss, Tom Palmer, Yves Forquina, and Josepino. Gorr, as far as personality, he's just really mean and hateful because of what happened to him, which I think, within the context of the universe where these gods do sometimes help people, it makes sense that there would be a Gorr out there. And I'd say, maybe killing all the gods is a little much, but I think as a motivation for a character, makes complete sense. He doesn't really work with other characters, he doesn't have allies, he hates Thor, presumably hates Hercules and the other gods. He's played by Christian Bale in Thor Love and Thunder. I think that version of the character, the intro is perfect as a Gorr. It's pretty much what issue 6 is, although there are some slight differences. And I think the attitude of Gorr is relatively on point. I think the idea of giving these monologues and being these gods are so stupid and I hate them and I want to kill them all and torture them and make them feel like they have not done a good job. I think that's pretty accurate. I don't think Thor Love and Thunder manages to reach the heights of the Jason Aaron run that it's kind of based on. And if anything, it seems like that's because it's mushing a couple of Thor stories together. Also, I feel like one thing that's kind of important about Gorr is that he looks weird. He has a very specific design. He's got those big, I don't even know what you call them, tube thingies, like some of the aliens have in Star Wars. I really wish, I know it would have been uncomfortable and maybe the CGI wouldn't have looked perfect, but I do wish they had gone for that with Gorr. Just because, especially the first couple times you meet him, I feel like Gorr should feel otherworldly. You should see this guy and not even kind of know where he's from. Is he from hell? Is he an alien? What's this guy's deal? But either way, it's clear that Christian Bale had a good Gorr performance in him. It just maybe wasn't used as fully as it would like. Especially because this is one of those comics that's so cinematic. It's very easy to see how this story could translate, and then seeing what things you're missing, what cool moments, what All Black the Necrosword can be. So it's kind of a shame. I doubt we'll ever see Gorr again. His powers are really vague, but it's just the Necrosword gives him lots and lots and lots of power. He creates constructs, he can use darkness, he can fly, he can do all kinds of cool stuff. And we're talking about Gorr this week because he was just introduced into the collectible card game Marvel Snap. In Marvel Snap, Gorr is a 6-cost, -1 power, with the ongoing ability +2 power for each on-reveal card in play. So this is really interesting because on its face, this doesn't seem incredibly God. There's not really a God archetype for him to be against, except this is the anti-Asgardian archetype. If your opponent is playing Thor and Beta Ray Bill and all the Hammers and Frigga and Odin and Loki, your Gorr is going to be very, very, very powerful. And the same is true for cards on your side. So if you have an army of Thors, a Gorr is also really helpful. And I'm assuming they had to make his power so low because they expect his power to get so high. And it has to be +2. If it was +1, that wouldn't be as significant. But what that means is you have a card that can slot nicely into my favorite kind of deck, a Mr. Negative deck. And he can become a 0 cost 6 power with the ongoing ability plus 2 power for each on reveal card in play, which is like one of the greatest cards ever. Especially because a lot of the Mr. Negative cards, like Ironheart or Sage, are on reveal cards, so they will also power up a Gorr. I think it's kind of cool because obviously he's never worked with Mr. Negative, but he has a black and white color scheme which fits in nicely with Mr. Negative's whole vibe. I wouldn't say Gorr works particularly well with any of the characters that he should, right? Like Gorr is empowered by something that is kind of a symbiote. He doesn't work particularly well with symbiotes. He is also empowered by the Weapon of Null. He doesn't work particularly well with Null outside of maybe a negative deck. But that's the thing. I think Gorr as a piece of a deck is going to be great on his own, as Gorr should, right? Like Gorr does not work on a team. He's a one-man God Butcher. Now, we are very lucky, especially after King Eitri, that Gorr has wonderful variants. Like, currently in the data mines, there are 7 really solid variants. Even the base art, Ryan Kinnaird and Eduardo Mello, good. There is a Dan Hip for Gorr that I think is fun. There is a Kim Jacinto, which is gorgeous. Kim Jacinto's work so angular, and Gorr, obviously, because of the Necrosword and all the, kind of lines that'll come with that, you can draw that in a way that's pretty angular and cool. There's also a variant by Jason Kang that is the version of Gorr from Thor Love and Thunder. That looks pretty cool. There's also a version that is one of the actual pieces of art from, I want to say, like the later part of the run by Esad Ribic. So this is the only one I think that comes directly from the comics. Then there's also a Victor Pharaoh. This is one that you can get in the super rare pool, but you can buy from the store. Looks cool. Really goes in on the cape. And then an Andrea Guardino variant, and this will be in the Spotlight cache, but like, oh my god, it's so good. I do think this is the best one outside of the Esad Ribic, which is hard to not like the original Gorr, the drawing, but I do think the action of this image really sells how much Gorr just is like a destruction machine. I think that's really cool. He's also in a Spotlight cache with Havoc and Legion. Both have some really weird variants. Havoc has the Baldari variant, which I think looks cool. Then Legion has a Tradmore variant, which I don't know if we were doing any Tradmore stuff in Marvel Snap. Tradmore is a wild artist. Silver Surfer Black is a book that they worked on that a lot of people have seen, but like very trippy stuff, very cool. So as far as I can tell, this is the only Tradmore card in Snap right now, so that makes that kind of fun. Legion's a very good card. Havoc's interesting. Sometimes Havoc is good, but I wouldn't say Havoc's like a need to get. But overall, I think there's a chance, I want to say probably a pretty good chance too, that Gorr comes out of this season as the biggest card, like the one that, looking back 2 seasons, it's going to be like, some of those were good. I mean, obviously Gorr is incredible, but we'll see. I'm very, very curious to see what people do with Gorr. As always, thank you to Bernardo Tellish for helping me write this, put this all together. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I will see you next month for the Marvel Rivals season of Marvel Snap, which, if you know anything about these characters, it's going to get weird.